It's a great pleasure to welcome Brent Flint, who is the head of enterprise applications at Dimension Data. Brent, it's great to have you on the program, and welcome. How are you doing?
Yeah, fantastically well. Thanks, Aki, and great to be here. Thank you for hosting.
That's awesome. Tell me, as the head of enterprise applications at Dimension Data, what do you do? What does your job entail?
Aki, we are largely an ERP applications provider in my particular practice. So we're big players in the SAP ERP space, as well as Oracle and Microsoft. So we kind of pride ourselves as being specialists in particular areas, but being able to address our clients' need agnostic of the OEM.
Fantastic. Well, I mean, when you talk about ERP, it's kind of central to every organization, right? You get the ERP wrong, whatever digital transformation you put into an organization, it goes horribly wrong. And I guess there are challenges as well, that ERP migrations, you often hear of these kind of challenges. So with that in mind, and you look at the businesses that are out there, what kind of challenges do these businesses face when it comes to ERP migrations?
Yeah. Okay, I could go on forever, but let me try and be quite succinct. I think when you look at an application migration or an ERP move into cloud, often we are fixated on only the ERP, but there's a lot of other sort of elements in that full tech stack that have to be considered. So you look at your underlying hyperscaler performance, you look at your applications, you've got to consider your network. Your security posture, so quite a bit that needs to be thought of, and I mean the only thing I would suggest is that you can't go into this thing with a piecemeal approach. You've got to look at a holistic approach on that full stack, and I mean a simple example is if an application is migrated into a cloud environment, and you don't consider things like network latency, as an example, your experience is manifested on the desktop in terms of slow responses and unable to transact or bad client experience. But the real source of that issue is bandwidth in the network. So when you look at these migrations, it's really important to consider all of the elements in the stack. And I think that's a consideration that many of our clients in the market sometimes overlook. We've got to look at that holistic approach to take in an application into cloud. And as you all know, there are going to be dependencies. You talk about an SAP or an Oracle or Microsoft being your core ERP, but there are always other components that link into and require integration. So you're never just moving one application. That's and in a recent case, we had 120 other apps that migrated with a core ERP. So, and they're all these integration points. Yeah.
So I guess what I'm hearing from you, it can get quite complex. And you mentioned the latency. It's such a simple thing, right? But you actually, when you look at it from a holistic point of view, as you mentioned, you can understand how latency can cause massive challenges. And the overall experience of using the platform is, you can spend millions on the platform. If the latency is wrong, it's everything is pointless, right?
Correct. And I'll give you a good example. We recently moved a large manufacturing environment to cloud, and one of the sort of business requirements was to de-risk themselves. So they looked for an offshore location, and they're a global operation. And one of the things that we were able to do is a latency test based on the user base. So we ended up hosting the application, the core ERP in Singapore, because that made the most sense from a latency point of view. And most of the users, were either European based or Asia Pacific. So that was a more central location. But that's just a simple example. Like there are many ways of going about it. And I suppose what I'm suggesting is that you really have to plan that journey to cloud, and you have to plan it holistically.
Yeah, you're spot on. You talk about the cloud a lot, Brent. Why would a client move to the cloud or not? Keep it on-prem. And everyone seems to be moving to the cloud, and there's a lot of stuff going up there, and it does make a lot more sense in most cases. But why would people move to the cloud with an ERP system?
I think there are a couple of reasons, okay, and I'll touch on a few. Some of them are technical reasons. So let me give you an example there. Your on-prem hardware equipment comes to end of life, or it's not performing, or it's not stable, and you then, instead of refreshing your infrastructure and managing it yourself, you put that into one of the large hyperscalers, AWS, Microsoft, Google, whatever it may be. So those technical reasons would pertain to stability. Data centers, I mean, a big impact to us in South Africa is obviously your power supply. So a lot of people are saying, listen, I don't want to deal with escalating diesel costs and escalating rerouting and redundancy in DR. So let me put my environment into the cloud with a managed services partner, and you can kind of tick that box. I wouldn't suggest that it's something that you take off the radar in terms of monitoring and managing, but at least you're not dealing with those sort of day-to-day operational aspects of keeping your environment, your mission-critical environment up to speed. And then, so that's the sort of technical infrastructure stuff. But then if you look at the application side of the business, there's also there's a requirement, and if you think back to COVID times, all of a sudden, all of our clients needed to have an ability to transact as an e-commerce platform. And, a lot of these are pre-built. You can get into them quickly. You can integrate them into your existing ERP. So businesses are also looking to transform and digitize, as you suggested earlier. And one of the ways to do that is to move to cloud-based technology, because you can do it pretty quickly. It's best practice. They've often thought about the sort of optimizing of your business processes and how you can protect yourself against software refreshes. So a pile of reasons. And I think it's also, there's a gross generalization, Aki, in terms of people saying, these are the 5 reasons you go to cloud. I would suggest that, they're never the same. If you look at different business requirements, different maturities, it's not a cookie cut approach. There are methodologies that de-risk you, but it's a very personal kind of or business specific engagement.
So so those are great reasons to migrate, and of course, it all talks about elasticity and agility within an organization, and I think that it just makes more sense. Every one of those arguments you put forward really makes a lot more sense for an organization. And we know that in the world that we're living in today, organizations need to be agile.
Yep.
They need to have that kind of speed, and they need to be able to move quickly. But how do you actually manage and measure the success of a cloud migration? Is that even possible?
Yeah, I think, and I spoke to sort of a recipe, and we've certainly developed a number of methodologies that will help us accelerate cloud migration. Now, one of the big challenges, Aki, that we have with migration of ERP into cloud is data or custom code. Now, you can imagine an ERP environment that's been sort of on-prem for a number of years. There's a whole lot of customization that has taken place, and you need to have the ability to really fast track to a standard or best practice way of managing those application outputs. But also, things like your data. Two of the biggest challenges we face in client or ERP migrations would be data quality being the one thing, but then also the resistance to change in the organization. So, if you've been manufacturing in a certain way for a number of years, very, very hard to suggest to a logistics director or a manufacturing factory environment that the process change. And that part of moving to cloud entails an executive appetite to adopt best practice and to buy into evergreen software and performance enhancements over time. The other thing, I suppose, is you also get in that package is almost a governance structure that comes with your security posture and limits any of the code development. So there are lots of platforms now that help us with that. But we certainly have what we call a factory, a conversion factory, which brings a methodology and has some data management and automated tool sets that help us cleanse that data and get it into the new environment quickly. one of those considerations, Aki, is when you do that move is, how long will you be offline for? And we've just taken a large financial institution production environment over a 48-hour period and brought them up in the cloud on the Sunday evening as per the project plan. Obviously, you want to do things like taking your test and dev and your DR environments first so that you mitigate risk. But lots of considerations in that process. I think every software manufacturer is pushing a cloud migration. We've got the likes of the AWSs, the Microsofts, and Google, all enticing customers to move to hyperscaler platforms. So we've certainly seen a big wave of activity. And if anything, it's a skills deficit that stops people moving as well. There's a bit of a fear of the unknown. Choosing a safe pair of hands is part of that evaluation process.
No, it's actually very true. I mean, the skills gap is quite scary. But also when you mentioned the hyperscalers, if you considered doing this, say, 5 years ago, it would be a different consideration today. If you look at the market maturity and how many hyperscalers are in the country at the moment, there's quite a bit of capacity. So that makes a lot of sense for many people. And of course, the infrastructure that Dimension Data has had over the last few years, and you've also scaled up considerably. Now, when you optimize, and often people talk about optimization and managing all of these things, how do you continue to optimize and manage your business when you're in the cloud? That's obviously a consideration. The skills come into play as well, but you always want to continually reevaluate and optimize. Is that a challenge to do that in the cloud?
Yeah, I think, the one thing that I think clients often don't follow through on is we build a business case prior to the migration to cloud. Now, often convincing the board of the business case is a challenge. At a technology level, everyone kind of has a sense that they need to move to cloud, but you've got to be able to articulate the business value. And often in building out that business case, that business case is used for the motivation to move to cloud, but often not revisited to check in and make sure that we're achieving the metrics that we set in that business case. And, I suppose price and cost sprawl is a challenge in the cloud environment, because it's quite easy to spin up or to sort of expand your infrastructure quickly and rapidly, but your cost containment has to be very tight around that. And one of the things that we provide as part of our managed cloud service would be a cost optimization exercise. And I'd suggest that on average, in the environments that we're experienced we can see 15 to 20% saving by doing those cost optimizations. Now, whether that's at a VM level, or at a disk level, or at a database level, there are various layers that you need to look at your application to do those cost optimizations. And the best, I would say one of the guidelines, if you look at your infrastructure or your hyperscaler bill, if that bill is static over a period of time, then I would suggest that you are not adopting cloud economics and embracing the benefits of cloud, because what you should be seeing is a declining cost optimization in terms of your hyperscaler if your workloads are static, or per unit growth associated with expansion. And I can assure you that most of the environments that we come across, there's a big opportunity for cost optimization and revisiting that business case to say, have we achieved what we set out to do? And that business case can also be related to opening new markets. So I spoke about an e-commerce engagement that might improve client or revenue, well, certainly revenue, but certainly client experience at the same time. So a number of metrics you set to make sure that you're unlocking the value going forward.
No, that's interesting. And what I'm hearing from you as well there is that you've got to continually reevaluate what you're doing in the cloud, right? And that's what the optimization is about, because you're going to find that you're going to have to, fine tune something on this side or change something on that side. And I guess there are pitfalls when it comes to this particular journey. It's never an easy journey because of the complexity of doing IT today. I mean, it's as simple as that. What would you say are those pitfalls that people should consider when they're embarking on this particular cloud journey?
I think a couple of points, like I might have touched on them, so excuse any repetition if I do. But the first would be, is your code ready for cloud? So how much custom development have you done in hacking certain systems together? What are those interfaces like? Are they clean? And are you ready? So there'll probably be some pre-cloud migration activity that needs to take place. So almost getting yourself ready for cloud. The second thing is that is speccing your infrastructure and making sure, to the point I made earlier, that your bandwidth and that your VM and your capacity and your disk are all optimized to support the application, and more importantly, either the client or your end user experience, so that you don't compromise that, because what you don't want is post migration is a whole lot of kickback from business or client because you have performance issues. So proper planning there. And then I think the element of training. Okay, so if business processes are going to change, or if there are different ways of operating that need to be introduced into the business, let's make sure that I will tell you that the first item that gets scratched off a project plan in terms of a cloud migration is change management. So many organizations think, well, look, I don't need change management. I will instruct my business on how they are going to use the new system. And that's, I would suggest, is a foot fault. Change management is really important, and we've got to get the users, be they end users or your own staff, to embrace the system. And so change management, I would really look hard at. Data is the other area. Very few organizations who don't have data issues in terms of quality standards, duplications. You've got stuff that has been in systems for years and needs to be tidied up. So those would be the kind of the pitfalls. And I think one last comment would be, once what gets you to cloud doesn't keep you there. To your point earlier, it's a process, not an event. You've got to continually, you don't get fit and stay fit. You've got to keep working at optimization, and just to look at those systems continually and embrace new stuff, because often you can save to spend. So whatever you can optimize will enable you to deploy another feature, and that kind of is part of that business case as well.
She's great advice. And isn't it amazing, Brent, when you talk about digital transformation? I mean, this is another form of digital transformation, but the factor of people that comes into the equation over and over again, that you need to get the buy-in for the success of the project. You can spend as much as you want. If you don't get the people and the buy-in and that factor right, then the project's just simply going to fail.
Yeah.
Some great tips and advice there. Brent Flint, who is the head of enterprise applications at Dimension Data, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of What's Next.
Great, Aki. Thank you for having me, and it was a pleasure to be here. Thank you.